Right. I think just about some of the challenges, I think, for unlocking the potential. I think some of the destinations have not really pushed the agenda of the domestic tourism, and the ecotourism in all senses seems to be somehow left out. But that's also the fact that we are not really investing in that sector as either private sector, public sector, and then we need to mirror the need of the private sector, the demand from the consumer to what the value of the proposition is from the other side. So ecotourism, I think it's almost left to government to tap into it, but our private sector needed to do more. And then when we say ecotourism, it's either in an environment like this where we are today, walking in park, activities around nature, ecosystems where we have, and we have an abundance of those things. But how do we transform them? That's something. So I think most of the time should be not left only for the public sector. I think the private sector can come in, but also look at aspirations of the growing demand of how our cities are planned, and then how our population are looking for something to do. But if there's no offer on the table, they will be looking for alternatives outside the continent. I think those are some of the challenges I think we have.
Yeah, Carmen, I totally agree, and I think it all starts with driving the demand and also changing the perception of those that need these services or make use of the ecotourism services. So first of all, as Rwanda, we started driving a campaign in 2016 of making Rwandans and also residents, obviously, aware of what we have to offer. Rwanda being an absolutely fantastic ecotourism destination, there is lots to do, like you rightly said. And having had that demand, pick up because of the campaign, and obviously this is not something that the government undertook on its own. It was a partnership with the private sector, and also the community is also seeing the value of preserving these important ecological assets. And with that, we saw even the private sector starting to take interest to invest specifically in various places like this one, Umusambi village and others, where the private sector, the communities, and also the public sector do join hands to, not only bring out the ecological value, but also generating an economic value out of these places. So the perception change has been something that has driven the improvement, but also making now investment very easy, and also working together, fostering collaborations across the board has been one way to drive ecotourism investments, and also driving ecotourism demand in Rwanda mainly.
Yeah, you're right. I think the aspect of the investment and also the value of all our ecosystems and how to turn them into business, it's important. But also I think what I'm seeing, on the continent is the appreciation of that sector from an economic standpoint, that are going to a national park or even visiting a place like Umusambi village. We are creating jobs. We are bringing the narrative that the community benefit. And who are the communities around this? It's us, all of us.
Exactly.
So if we can maybe change the narrative and even the stereotype, because we usually think the ecotourism and tourism is associated with a certain group of people. And it's really amazing when you see on a Sunday afternoon, this place is probably full of young people and young children who are visiting, and that's what we want to see, because these are the new ones, generation coming to go and then maybe go to Akagera National Park and then venture into other parks around the country, and then also outside Rwanda and then the rest of the continent.
You've just made a very interesting point on involving the youth. Ecotourism also serves as an educational tool to change those perceptions, the perception that people had, like you just said, from the beginning or from back in the days, and also making sure that there's a sustainable development and also a sustainable change of perception. I think involving the youth at this stage, and also opening up these places and these areas for for students, for young children to, have a hands-on, first-hand experience is very instrumental in making, the changes that we want to see in Africa. And the other point that I really liked that you mentioned was the partnership with communities. If us as Africans do not take the lead in resolving issues that are within our communities, no one else will come and resolve them, and therefore investors, people within different sectors taking interest and seeing the value of ecotourism or even the preservation of these assets in various ways and invest in them while involving communities and also making sure that they are the leaders in the exploitation of those assets, but also reaping the benefits and sharing the benefits. And that said, I would say in Rwanda, it's so nice to see that even when we started, we reopened after COVID. Tourism has been reopened for over a year now, since the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak, and it's so nice to see that these places are patronized by Rwandans and residents throughout this period, which again links directly to the benefits that communities continue to get. And within our tourism, the government tourism revenue sharing program, Rwanda has been reinvesting back in the communities from revenues that we collect from the parks. Over 7 billion, has gone to over 700 community projects. But that's from the beginning of the program, which was in 2005, and to see that even within the pandemic, we were able to invest over 700, close to 700 million Rwandan francs to benefit communities. The revenues did not come from anywhere else. They came from regional tourists and domestic tourists, and we're very happy to see that they were responding to the campaign and the promotional programs and incentives that we put in place, and the packages that the private sector was so swift to tailor make to respond to the expectations of the regional and domestic tourists. It's a beautiful thing to see that regional tourism and domestic tourism is actually one of the key things that we need to drive in Africa.
But there have to be deliberate efforts.
Absolutely.
I think, as you mentioned, you had to put incentives in place. The private sector was swift to jump on the occasion. And then that kind of like symbiotic marriage is what drives it, ecotourism and then regional tourism. Because the private sector, as much as they want to make money, and then also the government has to understand that this is going to be a very important sector. And then if you want to drive it, 365 days of the year, domestic and tourism is going to be the driving seats. And those incentives have to come from both sides. The private sector has to say, it's a trade, we are giving this, and then in exchange, the government has to support us. So perfect, I think that's the way to go.
Absolutely. On the impact of actually, and that is the most beautiful aspect. The domestic tourists and regional tourists responding to these packages has also helped to protect jobs of our own, protect jobs, and also help the private sector to navigate a challenging period. While the world was closed, the people in Rwanda and probably in other countries as well were able to enjoy their own attractions, and it continues. So it started before the pandemic. It's a trend that we see picking up even within the pandemic, and it will continue. And for this trend to continue sustainably, there has to be efforts, initiatives that are really intentional. I would start off by looking at, after exploring, your country as a domestic tourist, you would want to explore the region. And we need to take advantage of the fact that we have absolutely amazing offering within our region and on the continent itself. So us as Africans, how do we work together? And this is something that we've started with different countries. We are looking at, we've been working on bilateral agreements with various African countries on how to make our private sector work together to curate packages and offer, what regional tourists expect from each other. And also what has been incredible in this process has been on how we educate each other on how we best serve the expectations or meet the expectations of our citizens as well. If Rwandans travel to Kenya, what do they expect to see, and how does the private sector and the government work together to answer to the needs of Rwandans who would want to be traveling to Kenya. So one of those is that intentional, one of the efforts that we need to make as players and countries is to make sure that we drive intentionally initiatives that are able to make the conversions possible. The other aspect is to make so there's one part where you say, okay, this is the information, you've now been educated on how to serve best the regional tourist. So now is when they come to travel, we need to make their travel very seamless. We need to remove visa restrictions that delay the planning, frustrate the planning and the experience of traveling within Africa, and also making sure that the trip is not very long. We are a continent that you can travel to any time within. I think the farthest you could travel by plane would be maybe 5 hours. How do we make sure that you don't have to go through another continent to access another African country? That way people can, use the short time they might have and also make sure they leverage on repeat trips because they are within the same region, so repeat trips are possible, but they're only possible if the trip is seamless and convenient.
Yeah, sure. And then also, if you look into there are so many framework now, even if you look at the African Free Trade, Continental Free Trade Agreements, we agree that we are going to knock all the borders, we are going to open our facilitations on trade and tourism and ecotourism. But I think one of the quick wins for me, we learned by probably the hardest way. I think we were relying so much, over-reliance on the key source market. We had undermined also the potential Africa can offer. And by tapping into that market, it's going to require a lot of effort, but the efforts are not going to be maybe difficult because already we're convinced that the product is ready. If the product is ready, therefore the clients will come. So it's going to the drawing board and say, can we have a product which is complementing what my neighbor has? If Rwanda has a gorilla product, has a nature, what else my neighbor can offer? And then we are not competing, I think, within the same circle. I believe that we're competing with outside the continent. Let's build maybe synergies, put together packages which are so attractive that if you can't find something on the eastern part of Africa, you are looking for it in the southern part of Africa, in the northern part of Africa, and then the western part of Africa, in food, heritage, culture, music, fashion. And then look how even the pop culture now is, the new generation are looking for something closer to home. A short holiday is maybe 2 to 3 days, it's a weekend. A weekend you can't fly to Seattle or Canada. And then maybe it's Nairobi, it's flying to Lusaka, it's maybe moving here to Brazzaville, and Accra, then to Accra, to those places. So I think one of the quick wins for us is just to develop the right product, cater for the markets, which is asking us to go beyond what we used to do, the usual. And then we can't win if of only the usual on the table. And in the space of ecotourism, we need to also broaden up a little bit that space of ecotourism. Ecotourism is not just to go and see our beautiful giraffes and then enjoy the parks we have. It's activities, a boat trip on the lake. Hiking, walking and climbing, those are the things we want to also see, but that cannot be done if we have no change our mindset and then see it from a different angle, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then for all the BCC participants today, we want to raise a challenge to them. We want to challenge them to make the changes within their respective sectors, within their respective areas of responsibilities, of making this challenge possible, making this possible, because it takes so many people, it takes a village to raise a child, and therefore if we want to make this a sustainable solution to African problems today, which is making sure that the private sector invests in sustainable areas, including ecotourism, enabling community livelihood improvement, enabling wildlife conservation, and also sustainable preservation of these ecological assets. The solution has to start at home.
Yes.
And therefore for all the BCC participants, we're challenging them to make sure that they make small or big reforms in their respective areas to make travel within Africa seamless, enjoyable, and absolutely fun.
Yeah, and then also make this sector of ours sexy enough to attract the youth for employment. We need to compete with agriculture, ICT, tech. We want to drive the next generation to say that this is a sector where you can actually make yourself like a career, a living, and then that is also a possibility. But we need to also demystify it. I would say maybe sexy, because I think people think that you work in conservation, you're stuck in the middle of a national park and you're not doing anything. But it's beyond that. It's really changed the narrative, the story part of it, because we are proud of this. These beautiful assets are bringing jobs, are creating jobs, are giving opportunity for people to tap into other sector. And I think that's something else we need to maybe to highlight, that's also another advantage.